Anais Nin said, "The possession of knowledge does not kill the sense of wonder and mystery. There is always more mystery." How important is the idea of mystery in your work?
I would say it's very much, my work is very much about the magic that you cannot define, that you cannot learn in an acting school or in a singing college. It's about, you know, the magic of the human story. The human story, which includes all the tragedy possible, all the pain, the disappointments, the haunting, the longing, the longing for love, the solitude in a modern society or ancient society. I would say, you know, of course, love. All of that is not to be described in a scientific way, but in a magical way. And you know, with a tragedy, you have obviously the counterpole. You have happiness, the longing for happiness, and this yin and yang, this energy, what life is about and what songs are about. Because songs have a movement, they have a crescendo, they have a dramatic line, they have a conflict, a resolution or no resolution to it. But this kind of realism of this conflicted energy is the magic of life, and it's the burden of life and the magic of life. And it depends whether you see, you know, the glass half full or half empty. Mystery itself is a very interesting subject, and it you know, mystery which is searched for in religion, in philosophy, in knowledge also. And I would say the ultimate knowledge is the not the understanding, but the being in unity with the mystery of the world and the mystery of life, and that's a spiritual dimension, which again escapes the dimension of knowledge, but is something you know, more contemplative, and that is a very interesting thing. But I don't know whether that is almost too. I don't go that far in my work. I stay with a human being in my work, because that's what people connect to. They're very normal people who come to my concerts of all ages and all generations, with all different kind of common problems. And these problems I try to reflect in my songs, so people can connect to it. If it's too esoteric to go into the questions of mystery. There I like to read books and have personal discussions.
How do you come to discover and develop your capacity to express such a sweeping range of tones and emotions with your voice?
Well, it is a long journey, and it hasn't been, you know, my voice, I would say, and my concept of voice and the vocal instrument as a tool has changed very much over the years. There were so many chapters. In the beginning it was a tool, you know, a very powerful tool to, you know, blast the energy, and it had very little pianissimos. And then over the years I started to, you know, enjoy the pianissimos a lot more than the fortissimos. And then you study different cultures of music, which is each time a different exercise of the instrument. Of course, you know, the German song has a bit more of a rough attack on the voice. The French, which has a more romantic, impressionist use of the instrument. Then the tango argentino, which has a very passionate, almost a combination of the expressionist and the impressionist. Then there is the world of jazz, which I love very much. Where over the years you start to develop like a freedom with your voice, and you know, a range or a feeling for improvisation, and more in contact with creative musicians. I think that had inspired me over the last 10 to 15 years to be more experimental with my voice. And also I have to say, over the years, that the range of the voice increases dramatically. I would say I started out as a teenager maybe with, you know, maximum 2 octaves. And I would say I go far beyond 3 octaves now, because that's just what the voice, it goes much lower with the age, but it also goes higher with the craft, with the technique. So you add on both ends, and then you can, you know, I would say as long as you don't hurt your voice, you can develop it, you know, go the opposite way. And the worst always was for me to be in a Broadway production, to be in a production where I had to sing 8 times a week, the same show, the same songs, and the same technique, and it locked me up, and I wasn't free as a musical artist anymore. And after I got out of these shows, you know, I almost had each time a little nodule developing, because it was just too much stress to sing all the time, sing through colds, through throat infections, through fever and all of that. And so it took me almost a year each time to actually free myself from that pressure and develop an instrument again that could be bendable in all different directions. And that's what I like nowadays. I don't like anything stereotype, and I like to really feel the music the way, you know, the way it's meant to be, and you know, originating in each culture, and have a very diverse instrument. That's what I like.
Would you say that the English or the German language, would you say that they both have the same potential for expressing emotions through language and song?
Well, they have a different color expressing the emotion. The German language is very rich, and I love singing in German. It's always very real to me because I'm so connected to the truth of the word, because it's my maternal language, that I definitely feel a strong identity and a connection to the word when I sing in German. In English, you can bullshit around a little bit more. Often the lyrics are superficial, and they don't go as deep, and they don't have all the multiple satirical dimensions that the German has. But yet, you know, very strong, of course, and they're great adaptations of the Kurt Weill. You know, I actually like to sing the Pirate Jenny in English, and use the language of the audience to really connect to them, and use the joke and the provocation of the home language of the country. But all in all, I would say the French definitely is the most sensual language, and I really love to sing in French. It has just a beautiful music in itself, and just a beautiful way to create the word. It just stays in the mask, in the skull. The tone is really sits in a very nice place. It sits a lot more open with the German, and a little bit more throaty, and with the English, it sits. The English just obeys to the music the best, which is not a good thing because it loses importance. But then the Spanish, recently, I really felt I sing all the Astor Piazzolla songs in Spanish, and in the Argentinian Spanish, and the very specific accent of Buenos Aires. And I have to say, I just love that. It has such a bite and a zest and a fire to it, and a sensuality too. So it's interesting, you know. All of that is interesting, and I feel like a world citizen. I tour so much in all these different countries, including South America, that you know, I love to bring my German expressionism to all of these repertoires. And I would say, whatever I sing, there's always a little piece of Berlin in everything.
My next question had to do with exactly that you express a comfort and a fluency in German, English, French, and now I've learned in Spanish. So which language do you feel has the most potential to express what you consider your fullest range of emotions that you connect with in the most powerful ways?
Yeah, in a theatrical way, all of them. I love all of them. But in a personal way, you know, like my last album, Between Yesterday and Tomorrow, with all my own music and lyrics, it's all in English. Because English is my day-to-day language. It's my language of reality right now. I speak English with my kids. My life runs in English. Even though it's not my first language yet, it is very much a comfort zone. And the lyrics are very truthful, certainly if they come from my own pen, because obviously they have a personal content. And this new show, I was writing the music for the Bukowski lyrics, all the Bukowski poetry. I feel a strong connection to that, and it really depends on what lyric it is in English. Like the Bukowski is very rough, the lyrics, and very crude and down to the bone. And in that context, I love expressing whatever emotion and situation is described in the songs. It comes straight from the guts. There's no vanity or no search for beauty even in a perfectionist style. It is rather a very rough approach also in the technique of singing, I would say. And I love that also.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, how much intersection is there between your personal experience and the artistic territory that you've traveled? Would you say you're a very different person?
And the personas I on stage? Well, I mean, I don't need to be that dramatic in my real life,
right.
Thank God. It would be very exhausting. I save the drama really for the stage, I think. It's just, I don't like to go to parties, to dress up and to be a socialite. I like a very simple life, and just very simple qualities of life. And yes, on stage it's fun to dress up, to look glamorous, have a beautiful gown, and do the makeup and the hair, and get out there and just be some kind of almost a slightly elevated persona. It's elevated. I like it. It's aesthetic to me. It has a certain sense of beauty, which I don't cultivate really in my personal life that much. I just don't feel I need to. I don't need to do it for my husband, thank God. He doesn't ask me to walk around in stilettos like this, or and I don't like too much vanity in the normal life either. So on stage, it's a beautiful. It's almost like an art form. Like you create a sculpture, and I in a funny way, because of all these years of dancing and. In some kind of a strange way, I do have a physical sensation that I can fulfill this imaginary sculpture I created, and it works. My arms, my legs, everything works that way because I have, I think, the foundation of a dancer. But I don't need it much, I don't need it much because the singing and the storytelling is stronger. But yes, yet the physicality with it, that comes with it, the image that comes with it, I like to play around with it. So, but all in all, also because I'm obviously very extreme on stage, the feelings are extreme. There's extreme desperation. There's like, if you have the torch songs, there's like a strong scream, impact, a burst of energy and vocal performance, and you definitely look for the very dark sides of stories and descriptions in life, and all of that. I don't quite need in my personal life, but yet I love to study it. This is what I am immense. This is what I immerse in, and I take nutrition from. I'm not a romantic performer who sings operetta songs. I love the reality aspect in the performance.
Has becoming a mother deepened your creative and imaginative landscape?
Oh, I know. I'm a mother for so many years already. My oldest is 17. He's going to college next year. And I'm certainly, all in all, a much more balanced person since I became a mother. I would say in my 20s I was crazy. I was slightly self-destructive. Not that I did drugs or anything, but it was just not healthy for my soul to be so self-concerned and always me and career and audience and pressure and press and what do they think, reviews and all of that. It was just, a vicious cycle, too much pressure, and it wasn't about happiness in life. The one thing you have, and it goes by so fast, it wasn't about that. The worries were about profane things which really didn't make you a happy person.
Right.
And I have to say, since I have a family, I have a perspective. You know, I enjoy my work tremendously, maybe even more since I have a family, because it's my own thing I can escape from, and it's my fulfillment, and it's this special magical space where you slightly touch on mystery, but it's this magical zone which is not quotidien. It's not normal, like normal life. It's something elevated, and I enjoy that. It's spiritual at the same time. And then you have the very normal life with very normal worries, and that connects you strongly to the real worries of life. And so it's a very good thing. I constantly feed from my real life when I go on stage, you know, with all the emotions.
What was your first exposure to jazz music?
My first exposure was very early on. My dad was a jazz lover, and he had all the records, you know, even being German, he was a jazz lover. He had all the records, the LPs in his shelf, you know, the great jazz singers, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Nancy Wilson, Etta James, Esther Phillips. I remember all of the stuff, and you know, the traditional jazz, of course, and the records, Duke Ellington, it was, and he was a music lover. He loved that stuff. And when I was a teenager, I had my first bands. I had like a big band, the school big band. I was a singer in the school big band, and I had a rock band. We did kind of jazz rock. It was the 70s, Joni Mitchell stuff, and Chick Corea, and the Brecker Brothers, and then I had a little jazz trio with three older guys, you know, in their 50s. They looked very old to me at that time. It's not old to me anymore, 50. And they were doing the standards with me, you know, Lullaby of Birdland, Paper Moon, Blue Moon. It was just wonderful, and they taught me these songs and made me listen to the recordings of the great jazz singers, and and you know, I sang very badly. I do think, you know, the other day in my country house I found some old cassette from the 80s, and I said, oh my goodness, what the heck was I doing? It was awful. But it was all, you know, learning, and learning how to control your instrument, and you know, the pitch was okay, but the rest was, the style was terrible. But I learned, and I developed the sensitivity to it, and then, you know, the connection to jazz got a little lost over my first jobs and the musicals, and so you get captured in that world of performing musicals. And then I got back into the jazz really once I had a band again in the 90s, with the musicians who all of the musicians love jazz, and they love Brazilian music, and that's, you know, they feed on that inspiration from the Brazilian jazz scene. Most of the musicians here in New York too, and that's when I really started to, you know, venture more in the world of jazz. And then when I started to write my own music, I definitely was very much inspired by it too.
You come from a background in dance, and you use your body as a vehicle of expression, where the gestures convey as much meaning as your words. Can you just speak a little bit about your dance background and what role movement and gesture plays in your performances?
Well, I wouldn't say that it has as much importance. It's only an extension to the word. Definitely the word is the center, you know, the music interpretation, the vocal interpretation is the center, and the gesture or the movement or the step is an extension to it, like an adornment of it. Well, not more, and I wouldn't like to have a choreographer at all nowadays. I wouldn't like to be locked into any kind of movement that is from the outside put upon me. Well, I mean, as a teenager, you know, as a kid, I started ballet, and then I did all the different dances and dance academy in Cologne, and then in the musicals, I never wanted to be a classical dancer, and I didn't have the tools to be a classical. I'm far too turned in, not turned out enough, and my feet are just not great enough for it, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was just looked much too hard. Plus, I loved singing already at a young age. So in the musicals, I could combine the three, between acting, singing, and dancing. I could combine this, but I wasn't so happy with the actual territory of musicals. It was only half satisfactory to me. Cats, I really hated to play cats. It was just awful to be a cat and to do these movements. And I came from acting school. I wanted to perform and use my words, and to be trapped as a cat for a year. I played Peter Pan, and I loved that. The little, being always played by a woman, the little young boy who didn't want to grow up. I liked that, the spiritual and the action of it. That was fun. The music was cute. And then after that, Kurt Weill review, which it was very important to me because I learned of all the different periods of Kurt Weill, the German, the French, and the American period. And then I did Cabaret, the musical Cabaret, Sally Bowles, and that was fun because it was a part which has a depth. It was a tragical part. It didn't have a happy ending. It was a part that included desperation, survival, sadness, and musical passion. So it was a very good part. I loved that. And after that, I didn't do musicals for a while, and then I just did my own shows. And then I only did a musical again with, actually, The Blue Angel in Berlin was in between, which was okay. I didn't like the production. And then I did Chicago on Broadway, which was fun but very acrobatic and nothing deep at all. And I suffered also greatly under actually performing it for 2 years, even though, it was a great high-profile job in London and here on Broadway. The part itself is a very shallow part, and it made me sad, and I couldn't feel the fulfillment I wanted to have from being on stage. So I really like the most to be in my own concerts because I can choose the repertoire I put together the songs I like, and it has a big rainbow, a big arc of diversity. The German, the French, the Spanish, the jazz, the improvisations, the comedy, and I can really feed from so many different repertoires. They all live in me because I lived in so many different. I lived for so many years in Paris, in London, in Berlin, and now New York, which is such a diverse place. So I feel my own concerts always represent the best my journey, and my journey is a German journey. It is based on the German repertoire. It is a dialogue that I open with this musical journey up, a dialogue with the past. It's a very complicated dialogue. It's about the pre-war period of the Weimar Republic. Most of the composers were Jewish. Most of the writers were killed by the Nazis or thrown out of the country by the Nazis. So it is a dialogue I open with these concerts about really the German past and all those awful emotions I had about it, growing up and being a post-war generation German, yet searching desperately for answers by the generations of my parents and grandparents about how this Holocaust could have happened, and those answers never were given. And I grew up in a Germany that was so terribly post-war Nazi Germany still, because all the Nazis went back to work, and there was a strong anti-Semitism still existing in the society, certainly in the 50s, and people did not want to face what they were, bought into at the time of Hitler, and they were bought into, hating, Jewish people and being imperialistic and ruling the world. I mean, and a whole sophisticated, incredibly cultural nation bought into that and went for it. So it was something that drove me so crazy as a young person, how that could have happened, and something about the obedient aspect of the German nature that that fueled me with rage and fueled me to become an artist and also perform this music that opens this chapter, this complicated chapter.
Wow. In much of your work, you seem to be attempting to address the mistakes of history, and both on a political and on a personal level. For instance, as with a lover who's been wronged. So do you see the role of the artist as having a responsibility, or an artist as a avenger or a messenger?
Well, both. The artist is a messenger. It's a medium. The artist is somebody who can transport the audience to a new dimension that confronts whatever it needs to confront. That dimension, political, historical, background and situations, but also the artist takes you into an emotional world that you can identify with as an audience. And yes, it is kind of my mission as a young German performer, not anymore young, but I used to be young, and definitely the post-war generation to revive this music. And for some reason I became the tool of the revival wave, because Universal Music had suddenly decided in 1986 to re-record the works of Kurt Weill, which only existed in those years through the very early 1950s recordings of Lotte Lenya, and nothing after that. And obviously the German language still was very stigmatized all over the world from the Hitler time. And so suddenly they had a project created by this musicologist at Universal to re-record by the Nazis called the degenerate music. The music that wasn't a proper Aryan standard to the Nazis. And you know, this was classical music, Goldschmidt, lots of composers, and in the chanson area, of course, Kurt Weill, Bertolt Brecht. And they chose me as I was 23 at the time to be the antagonist of this project and to do the recordings. And then suddenly in 1987, with the first release of Ute Lemper Sings Kurt Weill, this album was really initiating a whole wave of revival of the Weimar time and the composer Kurt Weill. It was placed at all the universities here in the States. I still have people who come to me to concerts and said, you know, in 1987 I was in college in Boston and we studied your album. 80% was German on the album, and through this album they studied the time, you know, and the historical background. And it was 50 weeks in the crossover charts on #1 here in 1987. You know, it was a very special thing, and I was very lucky to be the tool of this revival, and that opened up also a great responsibility for me. You know, to really face the past, to be able to talk about it, and you know, sometimes you know, be uncomfortable in Germany because they didn't want me to really talk too much about it, and also travel to Israel, just do concerts there, and live with the, you know, with the responsibility of being a post-war German, and talk about it, you know. And it was very important to me to sing it in the beginning to the young people of my generation, just to tell them the journey of Kurt Weill, to tell them what happened, the years of the Weimar time, the immigration, the denunciations, you know, the way they were ripped of their identities and artistic work, and then, you know, especially in Kurt Weill's case, his survival first in France and then his new career, surviving career in the States, which meant for him to totally redefine himself as a composer and adapt to the American music tradition, which had nothing to do with the European one. So it was a very interesting story to tell, and I was just very passionate about telling it.
And Kurt Weill's collaboration with playwright Bertolt Brecht led to the merging of jazz, folk, and pop genres. The result was a radical reinvention of the song as a political message maker. Do you see the song as still having the power to convey powerful political messages today?
Well, not if you look at the charts. You know, it's what we have nowadays is a very different musical aesthetic. You know, I see my teenage kids, what they listen to, and you know, I watch with them American Idol because, you know, they're following those reality shows. It is definitely a different thing. It's interesting. I was just reading this book, a biography of Bob Dylan, and of course he was, you know, even though it wasn't his original intention to become politically involved, yet he became a protagonist to the political movement in those years with the Vietnam War. And it's interesting that he said he saw in whenever it was 70 something, a three-penny opera on Broadway, and the song "The Pirate Jenny" totally took his socks off. And he said, I didn't know people could write music like that, tell stories in music like that. And it deeply inspired him to, you know, create a whole new generation of songs inspired by the Pirate Jenny. And it's a pity that nowadays really songs like this don't quite exist anymore. You know, Brecht was, it's not only due to Weil, who was a great composer, but really to the lyricist, to Bertolt Brecht, who was a great poet, who was a thinker, a philosopher, a humanist, who really was able to put into the word in a very unpretentious way great political intentions and humane intentions. And very unpretentious, not intellectual, just very grounded, so that anyone could connect to it and anyone could understand. And sometimes I feel a little bit that's what Bukowski did, by the way, too, very unpretentious. And that's why they didn't want to give him the status of being actually a poet forever and ever. So you know, I love new material, obviously. It's great always to look at the new talent and the new writers. But the genre, what Weil and Brecht created, is unique, and somehow it had never been redone. You know, but you do have artists that are politically aware, and you know that still exists, but in a much more commercialized way.
You're currently working on material by Charles Bukowski, and you've also worked on Paul Celan's poetry. So, do you read a lot of poetry? Is this something that you've done throughout your life? And what is it about poetry that you connect with in your music? Do you think that is something that you look for, that poetic element in the material that you cover?
Well, hopefully, you know, all the songs you sing are poetic. Poetic just means that they are artful. The lyrics are artful and beautifully placed together in their rude or crude way, or in their very romantic way, whatever way they're written in, and that they express in a beautiful way your soul, and that's poetry. So I'm not really reading much poetry, honestly, but the Paul Celan project was something, of course, with his history, being Jewish, and I think he committed suicide, but I think his family was pretty much killed by the Nazis. So there was definitely his poetry was just an unbelievable, painful stride to try to express the unbearable pain he felt about being alive, and about the tragedy of his family and all of that. I mean, the poetry is so, how do you say, I mean, he almost couldn't speak, and it's interrupted. The poetry is interrupted, is almost expressing the impossibility of the word. The word is not being able to capture the pain he felt. So I thought it was just unbelievable to use his words and the subtext of his words, more even than that. And of course the music by Michael Nyman expressed very much the subtext that wasn't even written in the words, but you could feel it and see it. And that was a very interesting project, and it was very deep, and I enjoyed it. Bukowski is very different, but I don't know, because there's something so unpretentious about his writing. It's very situational. It's like movies each time, you know. The characters are very rough and raw people, and there was something about it that I took from the Brecht world. There were a lot of Pirate Jennies, a lot of Zorabaya Johnnies was in there somehow, and never with a happy end, just like Brecht's songs, and I just connected to it. And then with my partner, he started to make some grooves, and I said, you know, this all looks like Bukowski has to come into this. And then it just was born, and it was one of those spur of the moment things. And once I got started, I got crazy about it. I read obviously through all the poetry books, and took like a bunch of 50 poems that had a pulse to them, like a rhythm to them, and also a very direct connection that I could see, you know, live in music. And then go through the different chapters of his poetry, the personal poetry, the political poetry, the poetry about the women, about aging, the poetry about his abusive childhood with his father. So different chapters to it, and then it all suddenly became a theatrical journey, crossing many years of his life, and it's so much fun. Yeah, it's just a great fun project.
Painting is also an art form that you've explored in depth. What is it about painting that you're able to express that you cannot express in song?
Oh, nothing. I'm a very worthless painter. I would say very much autodidactic, and I always paint when I have a vocal problem, when I have to totally shut up for a couple of days, and you know, not doing anything or reading books is just I don't. It drove me crazy. So I started to. It was 20 years ago. I started to, you know, teach myself how to paint, and then I got crazy about it. It was such a pleasure to fill a white canvas, you know, it takes days and days, but then you create this universe, and it's out of nothing, but it's not reality, it's an alter reality, and it has different colors than reality, different shapes than reality. It comes from somewhere, and I thought it was very magical whatever was planted on the canvases, and there was always people in situations, but you know, looking at the different stages of the art of painting, that you know, you don't need to be like a great realistic painter nowadays to express. You can be very rough with a very rough brush stroke, and you know, paint very fast if you want to, or paint very slow if you want to be meticulous. So I just got into it, and I saw that something was coming out, and it was necessary to come out, and it was definitely a great way of being creative, but in a totally silent and isolated way. And it was healing my vocal cords.
Wow.
Wunderbar.
Yes.
Wunderbar.
Wunderbar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yes. Was.